Pause. Breathe. Listen. What you're about to receive is not just another piece of content. It's a silent message that cuts through the noise of everyday life and finds you precisely at the moment your heart most needed to be reminded that God is still in control. This message didn't reach you by chance, nor merely by algorithmic suggestion. It found you because now was the time. Maybe you're facing inner anguish, financial struggles, sleepless nights, a heaviness in your chest that won't go away, and yet you keep trying to hold it all together. But this is God's timing, and He does not overlook the silent cry of a weary soul. This is the message Charles Spurgeon would have wanted you to hear, and maybe only now are you truly ready to receive it. So allow yourself. Silence the external pressures. Let this voice, which seems to come from afar, actually resonate from within. When the heart is weary and the mind overwhelmed, God speaks in silence, not with thunder, but with tenderness. He uses whatever it takes to reach you: an image, a video, a forgotten phrase as you scroll. It's no coincidence. There's a reason you're here. Deep down, you already feel it. Something needs to change. And that transformation doesn't begin on the outside, but within. Often, we cry out for answers in desperation and get frustrated by the silence. But God's response rarely comes the way we expect. It doesn't compete with the noise. It waits for the exact moment when our spirit is ready to listen, not with ears, but with a surrendered heart. The divine call is subtle. It doesn't barge in. It draws near like someone gently knocking on the door of your soul, waiting to be welcomed on. And what if this message is that invitation? What if this is the moment to let go of control and allow something greater to lead? If you're tired, confused, feeling overwhelmed inside, then stop. Don't rush. Don't run. Just stop. This might be the spiritual direction you've been seeking in prayer, even if you forgot to pray. If this touched you, like it, share it with someone silently struggling, and comment below. I choose to live with clarity. We live in a society that smiles on the outside and screams on the inside. So many people carry a composed face but a shaken soul. It's not a lack of faith, it's the excess weight. Anxiety suffocates. Internal pressures scream. The bills don't wait. The question, will I ever get out of this? Echoes in your mind and chips away at your peace. What few people see is what really hurts. The silent mental battle. The tightness in the chest. The exhaustion that isn't cured by simple rest. Some have faith but can't seem to trust. Some pray and still feel afraid. Affliction settles in quietly and drains the peace from the present. And no, the problem is not you. The problem is the subtle, deceptive idea that you have to handle everything alone. That if you let go of control, everything will fall apart. But what if letting go is exactly when you'll be held? Spurgeon once said, "The heart that trusts in God never walks alone, even in the dark." The absence of peace often doesn't come from pain, but from clinging to the illusion that everything depends on you. Anxiety feeds on haste, on the constant sense of urgency. But not all urgency comes from God. Not all speed is the right path. When worry becomes a permanent shadow, it's time to return to the only place where the soul finds rest. The conviction that God is guiding, even when He seems silent. Spurgeon, known as the Prince of Preachers, was no stranger to pain. He spoke with authority because he knew suffering firsthand. He faced deep crises, battled his own mental health, but never lost sight of the eternal. He once said, "I have learned to kiss the waves that throw me against the rock of ages." That phrase didn't come from a place of comfort, but from real experience, from someone who understood that pain is not always punishment, but a divine tool. It's in the midst of the storm that faith is forged. Like gold refined in fire, the soul shines after walking through heaven's silence. Maybe what you call a crisis, God calls transformation. Maybe your pain is being used as fertile ground for something new. And this isn't motivational talk, it's spiritual wisdom. Spurgeon taught that we shouldn't run from pain, but listen to what it has to say. Financial struggles, losses, frustrations, all can become instruments of growth. As long as we understand that God's timing never wastes ours. Jesus said, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life." Matthew 6:25. He wasn't just offering spiritual comfort. He was teaching a principle for living. Those words weren't directed at scholars, but at people like you, tired, worried, overwhelmed. Jesus doesn't offer only future salvation. He offers practical direction for the present. He points to the birds. They don't worry, yet they are cared for. And he asks, "Aren't you worth much more than they?" That passage from the Sermon on the Mount is not a theological abstraction. It's a real antidote to the poison of anxiety. The anxious mind believes that thinking more is solving more. But the truth is the opposite. Anxiety steals the now, and the now is all you truly have. Jesus reminds you, trusting God is not inaction. It's wisdom. It's choosing to rest, knowing that those who seek the kingdom first receive the rest as a gift. And what if your biggest financial or emotional struggle is actually a call to surrender? Jesus doesn't ignore needs. He simply repositions priorities. The focus shouldn't be on what's missing, but on who provides. Yes, the problem is real, but so is God's promise. He says, "All these things shall be added to you." That's not a metaphor, it's direction. There is a time to sow in silence and a time when heaven responds. But until then, faith becomes your invisible foundation. It needs no audience, no guarantees to keep going. It simply trusts. And perhaps that's exactly what God is shaping in you right now. Not the strength to control, but the surrender that allows growth. Many expect to hear God in thunder, but forget that He prefers the whisper. And that whisper sometimes comes disguised as waiting, as silence, as new beginnings that weren't part of your plan. But everything has purpose, even the pause, even the door that didn't open. Charles Spurgeon, in the midst of his own inner battles, understood that pain can be a divine tool. He said he had learned to kiss the waves that throw me against the rock of ages. This is not romanticizing pain. It's recognizing it as part of the process. The fire that purifies does not destroy the gold. It reveals it. And maybe this is your moment. Not to understand everything, but to trust as you walk. Because faith isn't proven when all is clear. It reveals its truth when the path is hidden. That's when you discover your foundation. That's when you learn to rest, even without control. How many times have you tried to solve everything with your own strength? Planned every detail, calculated every step, and still, something slipped through your hands. That's not failure. It's an invitation. An invitation to let go of the wheel and allow the captain to steer the ship. Jesus never said the road would be easy, but He promised He would be with you. And that promise is what sustains the soul in the midst of chaos. Because even when everything feels still, God is moving the pieces you can't see. True faith stands not in the absence of storms, but in the certainty that there is purpose within them. You don't need to understand everything to trust. Sometimes, logic hinders more than it helps. Because faith doesn't rely on what's visible. It's born deep within. It grows in silence, and it reveals itself in the fruit that blooms even in dry soil. There's a place of peace reserved for those who choose to trust without seeing, for those who pray even when it feels like there's no answer, for those who keep going even while tired. Because exhaustion isn't a sign of failure. It's proof you're still on the journey. Many confuse faith with strength. They think having faith means never feeling afraid. But true faith is the kind that moves forward even while trembling inside. It's when you say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know who is with me. And that's enough. God doesn't demand perfection. He desires sincerity. You can come to Him just as you are, tired, frustrated, full of doubts, even angry. He's not offended by your humanity. He invites you to bring it all and lay it at the foot of the cross, because it's there that burdens find rest. It's there the soul finds direction again. Maybe you've been trying to appear strong on the outside while falling apart inside. You don't have to carry that alone anymore. You don't have to pretend everything's fine. There is a place where you can be whole, even while broken. That place is God's presence. Charles Spurgeon wasn't a preacher of the stage. He was someone who knew the darkness of the soul. He faced crises, deep depression, but he never abandoned the source. He knew that even in the densest shadow, God's light still shines. And if you're in that valley now, remember, the valley is not the end, it's the path. And paths lead to new places. Anxiety often grows from the illusion of control. We think that if we plan well enough, everything will go as we want. But life rarely follows our plans. And that's exactly where faith becomes essential. Not to change the circumstances, but to change how we see them. Do not worry about tomorrow, Jesus said. And this isn't just poetic advice. It's practical instruction. Because tomorrow belongs to God. And when you try to live in it with today's mind, you weigh down your soul with a burden it was never meant to carry. Most of our anguish comes from trying to solve what hasn't even happened yet. But God lives in the eternal now. He meets you in today. And it is in today that you can rest, decide, pray, and trust. The secret isn't in knowing everything. It's in walking with the one who does. God doesn't call you to a heavy religion, but to a light relationship. A place where love doesn't require masks, where you are seen, heard, and embraced. And true transformation begins there, in the honesty of the encounter. You don't have to wait for an external change to live in peace. It begins within. It begins when you choose to. Let go, breathe, and trust. It's not passivity, it's wisdom. It's understanding that peace doesn't come from control, but from surrender. And that surrender isn't a one-time moment. It's daily, it's constant. It's waking up and saying, Lord, today I trust. Even if the scene doesn't change. Change my heart. That is the prayer that transforms. Because it doesn't depend on the external. It reshapes the internal. Maybe you're waiting for a big breakthrough, a clear sign, a wide open door. But sometimes God answers with a breeze, with silence, with a video like this. And in that moment, you realize He's been speaking all along. He was just waiting for you to be ready to listen. Faithfulness in small things reveals true spiritual maturity. Don't expect the grand calling if you ignore the small, daily touches from heaven. It's in the routine, in silent choices, that God tests the heart. Spurgeon knew this when he said, God shapes great souls in hidden workshops. It's easy to seek God in the big moments, in emotional events or eloquent words. But it's in the silence of your morning, in the way you treat someone who's tired, in the decision not to retaliate. That's where the kingdom is made visible. Maybe you're waiting for a great turnaround, but God is waiting for you to be faithful with what you already have. There's no promotion without process. And the process begins with humility, consistency, and surrender. While you prepare for what you want, God prepares you for what you need. It doesn't always match your plans, but it always fulfills your purpose. You may think nothing is happening, but the invisible is moving. The deepest transformation is silent. And God's presence is often more evident in a hard midnight than in a loud gathering. Heaven sees who remains loyal even when unseen. God sees who chooses truth without applause. And when His time comes, when you lived in secret will be rewarded in the light. The key to living the extraordinary is remaining faithful in the ordinary. And when your soul understands this, anxiety gives way to trust. You stop rushing to control and start walking to obey God, because those who walk with God know. It's not about speed, it's about direction. And if you're still here, it's because He's still building something in you. The spiritual journey is often not marked by big signs, but by deep silences, and in those silences, God works more intensely than we imagine. Heaven doesn't always manifest with noise. Sometimes, He shapes the soul in the space between prayers and answers. Charles Spurgeon understood this language. In his darkest nights, he didn't cry out for explanations. He bowed in surrender. He knew that God's silence was not indifference, but instruction. And maybe today, in your moment of waiting, God is also teaching you something that can only be learned in the dark. When you feel like nothing is happening, it may be the very moment God is working most deeply. While the world seeks visible results, the kingdom works at the roots. What is seen begins with what is unseen. There is an invisible process of construction underway in your soul. A subtle adjustment, a healing that happens in silence, a fortress being raised from within. That's why you've been feeling restless. Something is changing, not around you, but within you. The Holy Spirit is a craftsman of the soul. He is never in a rush. He is detailed. He tends to every emotional crack, every unhealed trauma, every whole life quietly dug. You are being restored by a love that sees beyond appearances. Sometimes, what feels like a setback is actually a replanting. And every replanting requires breaking away from the old pot. It requires the roots to be exposed, the old soil to be shaken off. It hurts, but it's necessary, because a new space demands a new kind of foundation. Spurgeon said that the pains of the present are rehearsals for future victories. This doesn't mean denying suffering. It means walking through it with hope, with the certainty that there is purpose, even when you can't yet see the result. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes, the greatest breakthrough is simply remaining steadfast when everything inside you wants to give up. To stay is also a form of faith, and persistent faith is one of the greatest testimonies a person can live. Maybe your next step isn't to do more, but to do less, to breathe, to be still, to observe, to listen to what God is saying behind your circumstances. Sometimes the greatest spiritual movement is to stop the culture of the world says, run, conquer, achieve, compare. But the kingdom says, rest, trust, wait, receive. They're opposite directions, and that's why they cause inner conflict. And that conflict may be the sign that you're being called to live at a different pace. Heaven's pace. You were created for a kind of life that doesn't depend on performance, where your identity isn't based on productivity, but on presence. Your worth isn't in what you produce, but in what you carry, the Spirit of God within you. God's kingdom isn't a system of trade. It's not do to receive. It's receive and then live. It all begins with grace. You don't need to deserve it. You need to open yourself to accept it. And that, yes, takes courage. The courage to believe in unconditional love. Charles Spurgeon spoke with authority about this because he lived through deep crises. Even while preaching to multitudes, he fought silent emotional storms. But it was in that weakness that he found strength. He once said, "My greatest strength was admitting that, on my own, I can't." And maybe that's your prayer today. Father, I can't carry this anymore. That confession isn't weakness, it's spiritual maturity. It's the point where pride ends and true trust begins. Where the mask falls and the miracle begins. God is not waiting for a flawless performance. He's waiting for truth. And truth, sometimes, comes in the form of tears, of confessions, of days when you pray only with your heart, Because words are gone. There's a kind of prayer that doesn't leave the lips. It comes straight from the soul. And God hears everyone. He understands your silence, your secret fears, your unanswered questions, and more. He's already providing answers before you even realize you need them. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to take the next step. And that step might be small, invisible to others, but enormous before God. Obedience in the detail is as powerful as in the big gestures. If you feel like you're going in circles, maybe it's because there's still something God wants to reveal at this point in the journey. He never wastes a season. If you haven't moved forward yet, it's because something here still needs to be healed, learned, or let go. Persistence won't solve what only surrender can transform. And sometimes, what keeps you stuck is your refusal to let go. Letting go isn't giving up, it's trusting. It's saying, God, I step aside. Take the lead. Control is a weight that feels like protection, but hides captivity. You weren't called to hold it all. You were called to believe. And believing means giving up certainty in exchange for trust. This is where many people struggle. Because control offers the illusion of safety, but the kingdom offers something better. Peace. Peace that surpasses understanding. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances, but on inner conviction. God doesn't want you to live in fear of losing. He wants you to live in the freedom of surrender. Because those who surrender live lightly. They live with room for the new. They live ready to be surprised, and God surprises. He acts where you least expect, through unlikely people at unexpected times. But for that to happen, you need to make room. Hearts crowded with control have no space for miracles. Spurgeon said, "It's when the heart is emptied of self that God can fill it with heaven." And maybe that's what's happening with you right now, an emptying. A season where everything seems to be slipping from your hands. But it's not abandonment, it's preparation. You are being realigned. And realignment hurts because it displaces, but it also heals. It also guides. It also transforms. What felt like loss turns out to be deliverance. What looked like delay becomes divine acceleration. When all that's left is trust, then everything that matters is already present. Living faith is born in that place of dependence. It's where you stop bargaining with God and begin walking with Him. If this message resonated in your heart, maybe it's because you've reached the exact point where the new begins. And the new isn't a place, it's a state. It's a heart that chooses to trust even without seeing. It's a soul that chooses to move forward, even when tired. You're closer than you think. Don't give up. Heaven hasn't forgotten you. Something is being woven behind the scenes of your life. And soon, you'll understand why you had to go through it all. Even when you don't feel it, you can still believe. Even when you see no signs, you can still move forward. Faith is when the heart stays, even when the eyes can't see the path. Charles Spurgeon understood that true faith isn't revealed only in church services or in words, but in the silent choices of daily life. He said that true spirituality is proven when no one is watching, when the stage is silence and the audience is heaven. You may be in a season of invisibility, where it feels like no one sees your effort, your battles, your faithfulness. But know this, God sees, God hears, God rewards. What you do in secret is celebrated in the invisible. The faith that moves heaven is not made of beautiful words, but of surrendered hearts. It's the kind that says yes when fear tries to shout no. It's the kind that walks through darkness with closed eyes, trusting that God's hand is still extended. Many people mistake faith for the absence of problems. But real faith shows up in the middle of pain. It's looking at the chaos and declaring, God is still here. It's seeing an empty bank account and still giving thanks. It's being sick and still choosing to praise. That's mature worship. That's transforming faith. Faith doesn't ignore reality. It submits it to divine truth. The truth that God is still in control, even when everything seems out of place. The truth that what He promised, He will fulfill, even if it takes longer than you would like. Spurgeon said that faith is like a muscle. It grows when it's stretched. Every challenge is a chance for spiritual strengthening. Every loss, an opportunity for redirection. And every tear, a seed for a future harvest. You may be in a valley right now, but the valley is not your destination. It's just a passage. And the God who walks with you in the valley is the same one preparing a table on the mountain. He doesn't abandon halfway. He sustains until the end. The world values results, but God values perseverance. Because the journey matters as much as the destination. And how you walk through the seasons defines the verse. Depth of your relationship with Him. There's a kind of victory that isn't visible. It's peace in the middle of the war. It's rest in the storm. It's the inner silence that boldly declares, I know whom I have believed. That's the kind of victory heaven celebrates. If you're tired of waiting today, know that even the waiting season is in God's hands. And while you wait, He works. He works in the circumstances, in the people, in the connections. But above all, He works in you. Don't underestimate this time. It's when your foundation is deepened. It's when you learn to hear without noise. It's when your heart aligns with heaven. What comes next will be sustained by what's being built now in silence. You're not late. You're right on time, in the timing of grace, in the perfect timing of revelation. And when God decides to move, He doesn't ask for permission. He transforms everything at once. But for that to happen, your heart must be ready for the new. And the new requires availability. A heart that lets go of the past, that forgives, that releases. Because what isn't healed will repeat. But what is healed becomes wisdom. God doesn't just want to deliver you from what hurt you. He wants to use it to heal others through you. Spurgeon said, the cracked vessel often overflows the most grace. Not because it's perfect, but because it has learned to depend. And that dependence creates intimacy with God. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need the willingness to keep going, even with questions. Faith doesn't require logic. It requires trust. And trusting means walking with the understanding that direction is more important than speed. You may not be where you want to be, but you're certainly not where you used to be. There is invisible progress happening. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every step of obedience is taking you closer to your eternal purpose. And when you get there, you'll look back and understand. It all made sense. Even the tears, even the sleepless nights, even God's no's. Because His no's are also answers, sometimes disguised as protection. There are moments when waiting becomes the greatest school of spiritual maturity. When everything around you goes quiet, the soul learns to listen more deeply. The absence of clear answers isn't the absence of God. It's His invitation for you to trust, not in what you see, but in who He is. Spurgeon often spoke of how God whispers through pain. When the lights go out, the spiritual senses sharpen. Sometimes, it takes losing external certainty to rediscover the internal source of faith. You are not defined by your circumstances. Your identity is rooted in Christ, not in the highs and lows of life. While the world demands performance, heaven seeks presence. While people look for results, God watches the broken heart. There is a strength that is born in surrender. It's not weakness, it's spiritual courage. The courage to say, I don't know how, but I still believe. That posture activates God's movement in ways you can't yet see. And when everything feels slow, remember, God's timing is educational, not punitive. He doesn't delay, He aligns. He aligns you with His purposes, with the right connections. with the decisions that will sustain the future He's preparing. Every sacrifice you make now is paving the road for blessings to come. It's not wasted effort. It's eternal investment. God doesn't waste pain, nor does He ignore faithfulness. Everything you surrender and trust, He multiplies in grace. So keep going, even without feeling it, even without knowing what tomorrow holds. Keep going, because this journey with God was never about control. It has always been about surrender. And those who surrender receive more than they could ever build alone. God is not impressed by the strength of your arm, but by the posture of your heart. A broken and sincere heart is the most powerful altar there is. And it is there, in the secret place, that silent miracles begin to happen. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll realize you no longer carry that burden. You no longer feel that fear. You no longer live the same way. Something changed. And it changed because you chose to trust, even without understanding. Even when no one sees, God does. Even when no one applauds, heaven watches. And when everything feels too small to matter, remember, it was with 5 loaves and 2 fish that Jesus fed a multitude. Little in the right hands becomes a miracle. You may not have all the resources, but if you have faith, you already have enough to start. Faith doesn't always remove the obstacle. It teaches you how to walk through it. Not because you are strong, but because grace is sufficient. Spurgeon said, "When God is all we have, we discover He is all we need." The absence of guarantees reveals the presence of the sustainer. It is in fragility that faith blooms most beautifully. And when the storm passes, because it will pass, you won't be the same. You'll be stronger, more mature, more aware of the presence that sustained you all along. So rise with courage. Keep walking. Heaven walks with you. This walk of faith is more than a journey. It's the building of a new story. And you are exactly where you need to be for everything to begin aligning. Not on the outside, but within. God is moving, and you are part of the plan. You don't need to understand everything to move forward sometimes. All it takes is one step. The size doesn't matter, the direction does. And if that step is toward God, then it's the right one. Charles Spurgeon said that when we trust God in the dark, we show that we know His light. You don't need all the answers. You just need to remain. The seeds you plant today, with faith, with prayer, with small acts of obedience, will bloom at the right time, His time. And God's timing never wastes yours. While the world looks for shortcuts, God builds lasting paths. And He's building something new in you, not in a rush, but with purpose. Every detail matters. Every season has value. So breathe, surrender, trust. God is already in your future, arranging what you can't yet see. And He is also here, right now, holding your hand. You are not alone. You never were, and you never will be. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who also needs this reminder. And leave a comment. I trust God's timing. This journey is yours, but you never walk it alone.